Welcome to Globewatch with me, Charles Ebuni. Few weeks from now, the next Secretary General of the United Nations will be announced. My guest tonight is one of the candidates running to become the Secretary General of the United Nations. She was the Environment Minister, the Health Minister, and the Education Minister of a country before becoming the Prime Minister of New Zealand. Currently, she is the administrator of the United Nations Development Program and one amongst the 11 candidates running to succeed Ban Ki-moon, who himself has urged for a woman to succeed him as from January 1, 2017 as the Secretary General of the United Nations. Can Helen Clark deliver for the rest of the world? Helen Clark, welcome to Globewatch.
Thank you.
You are just coming from the northern part of Cameroon, terribly affected by what President Paul Biya calls the enterprise of destruction, namely Boko Haram. Prior to your visit, Nigeria's richest person and the billionaire of Africa, Aliko Dangote, was in the northeastern part of Nigeria where some 50,000 children are suffering from malnutrition. What did you see on the ground in the far north region of Cameroon?
Well, I'm aware that the situation in northeast Nigeria is very, very bad, with children facing death if they are not given urgent support. Mothers very, very weak, families in a dreadful position. In North Cameroon, yes, there are humanitarian needs. The scale of the crisis has been bad in North Cameroon. But I do feel that the humanitarian response has traction, that now the early recovery development response is kicking in, and that the government itself is very, very focused on the issues of security and how to speed up development in the north. I very much hope there'll be a time when the families can go home to their villages. They will need to have assurances of security to do that, and there'll be a big job to do to get things built again. People's homes have been destroyed, their schools destroyed, their health clinics destroyed. So I really very much want to see the UN as a good partner working with the government and other partners to get the North back on track as Boko Haram is pushed out.
Aliko Dangote has pledged some $10 million for the reconstruction of the northeastern part of Nigeria affected by the conflict. The U.S. administration has promised some $40 million that should be around 22 billion CFA francs in assistance. What is the plus from the United Nations Development Program in this area in which you are heading?
Well, we lead the coordination of the UN agencies in Cameroon and around the world. And so if we go back 2 years to when the crisis really got very, very bad. There's about 150 million of assistance mobilised through the UN for the far north, of which very little was development. It was humanitarian need and relief response. The next year it climbed to about 180 million, of which some started to be allocated for emergency development initiatives. This year, already there's over $100 million that the UN has mobilised for the north, of which around 40 million is in the development area. And what I was looking at today was initiatives like a market, which is greatly improved so that people have better facilities to come and trade and do their business in. I know we're busy in the north on employment and skills initiatives for young people, supporting people to get their agricultural livelihoods going again, many of these important things. Now the next step will be the post-crisis needs assessment. This will start later this year. The UN, the World Bank, the European Union, at the request of the government, to put an overall analysis of the scale of the recovery required and a dollar figure on it. And when we have that report, that will support the government of Cameroon with us and others to go out and mobilise support for the recovery. So we're very engaged on this journey of supporting the North to not just recover, but move to better development than in the past.
Let me just give you a quotation of Yu Tang, the then Secretary General of the United Nations, back in 1966 when the UNDP was created. And he said that this was a front-line organization for a global war on want. You have been heading this organization for some years now. How are you managing the Sustainable Development Goal as the largest enterprise of development programs in the world?
Well, the development goals will succeed if countries embrace them, and where there are countries with a need still for international partner support, where the partners come in behind. In the case of Cameroon, Cameroon has asked the UN country team of agencies here to support it with the Sustainable Development Goals in getting them integrated properly into the planning and program and vision of Cameroon. So I'm confident that if at this very early stage of the Sustainable Development Goals, only kicked off at the beginning of this year, if countries around the world like Cameroon are asking for support to mainstream them into their own development plans and processes, we're going to get some real traction on them. The Millennium Development Goals got traction, but I think these goals are going to get more traction because they're owned by countries, picked up and run with from the very beginning.
Let me give you a picture of the world in which you are seeking to be the next Secretary General. 65.3 million people around the world have been forced from their homes. Amongst them are nearly 21 million refugees, over half of whom are under the age of 18. And the statistics can go on as bleak as they are. What do you intend to do as the next Secretary General of the United Nations, if and only if you succeed to win the bid?
Well, I think the advantage I bring to the job is that I have had many, many years of leadership in my own country. I was Prime Minister for 9 years. I was in the Parliament of New Zealand for 27 years. I've run minority governments. I know about political dialogue. I know about how you bring people together around a common cause. I've been at UNDP these last 7 years working very much on the development, environment, climate change issues. I bring a big development perspective to this. I say peace and security crises don't come out of nowhere. They come out of something that is wrong in the society. It may be a sense of injustice, it may be people don't feel they can express their views, and this tips over into violence, as we saw in the Arab states region. But basically we have to address what is driving these conflicts. Now, if you take the Syria conflict, which is well into its 6th year, it needs a political settlement. Anything we do will fall short until there's a political settlement.
Just 30 seconds. What would that political settlement mean as the next Secretary General from January 1?
A political settlement means people stop fighting. Then you can start development again. As Secretary General, you have to use every means at your disposal to get the great powers who will influence what happens in Syria to the table to work out a way ahead with
one
the
but
Syrian
last
people.
question before we separate, because we are running out of time. Your timetable is very charged. What will you do that Irina Bokova will not do, that Antonio Guterres will not do? What will you do in particular? What makes you unique as the next Secretary General of the UN that the other 11 candidates will not leverage?
You see, I never run down other candidates, but I can tell you about me. I have many years of leadership. I have many years of driving through transformational change in my own country to make people better off, happier, healthier, better educated. And at UNDP, I have a track record of tuning up the organisation, getting it better performing, and doing a better job. So I bring this results-oriented leadership approach to the United Nations. I have a very broad background in policy. Working as head of UNDP in the UN development system, you are active in virtually every country on earth, either the donor countries which are giving you money or developing countries that you're working with. I have very wide global networks. I would submit far wider than any other candidate. With respect to Africa, no one else has the exposure to and immersion in the development issues of Africa that I have. So I bring a very broad experience to them.
The administrator of the United Nations Development Program, Helen Clark, thank you very much indeed for being guest on Globewatch.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
The Director General of the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, Irina Bokova, welcome to Globewatch.
Thank you very much, Charles. Thank you for inviting me.
You are a red top Europhile coming from Bulgaria, the daughter of a former communist politician from a former Soviet Union satellite state. Can you tell my audience more about yourself?
You know, you mentioned my country, you mentioned also our past. I think I'm one of those lucky generation representative that could make the change happening in my country. Living in a communist past and going through a process of reunification of Europe, I think my generation had a unique chance to introduce democracy in the country, democratic reform, and finally UNESCO, nowadays Bulgaria is part of the European Union. I was also very, I would say, privileged to be the first state secretary for European integration of my country. After the 90s, I was the first one to start the negotiations with the European Union, to set the stage for the European future of my country. And nowadays we see Bulgaria, which is a country, one of the oldest countries in Europe, with a very long history, with a very long cultural traditions, with a lot of outreach, both east and west, north and south, to be a proud member of the European Union. So as I said, I'm lucky that my generation could live through this process, live through this transformation of my country. And I believe this gave me also a lot of opportunity and I would say a lot of courage to apply further for the elections of the post of Director General of UNESCO.
Equally, you are country's Minister of Foreign Affairs and an MP.
Yes, it was a very fascinating time. I was elected twice to Bulgarian Parliament in different periods. I was elected the first time in a predominantly Muslim region of the country. Bulgaria is also a diverse country. We have a religious minority in the country. I was very happy that I could convince to support me. I have been working very much also for tolerance, for peace in my own country. And my experience also as a foreign minister, although it was a short experience, longer was a state secretary with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and member of Parliament, gave me a lot of opportunity to be close to the people, close to the communities.
Okay. You were also your country's representative to UNESCO, and you equally served as your country's ambassador to France and the personal representative of the President of Bulgaria to l'Organisation Internationale de la Francophonie. Tell me, what are your priorities at UNESCO?
You know, I think one of my main priority, if I say in general terms, it's to make UNESCO relevant to the challenges, to the current challenges in the world. We see the world has changed a lot. What is happening now is very different from what happened even 10 years ago. A lot of pressures. We see the climate change advancing. We see, unfortunately, conflict in many parts of the world. We see people are under stress. There are millions of refugees, displaced persons. We see destruction of heritage, of ethnic cleansing even in some parts. We see still extreme poverty also. We see at the same time lots of opportunities. We see new technologies coming, we see innovation, we see a lot of economic opportunities, social opportunities of social mobility. And I believe UNESCO, with our agenda of education, a lead agency in the area of education for all, in the sciences, of how we promote sciences, innovation, new technologies, how we protect identities of people, how we bring more tolerance, a culture of peace in this so diverse world. It's a huge challenge. And I want UNESCO to focus on what today is very relevant.
Okay, you are saying that you want UNESCO to focus today on what is very relevant. You had inside knowledge before becoming Director General of UNESCO, because you had served here as your country's representative. Can I know from you what it takes for a lady like you to manage such a heavy, large machine like UNESCO?
Well, I think like any man, Director General, I have to cope with the pressures of reform, because any organization should be adapted to the new times. Of course, I would say for us probably it's even more difficult because in 2011 Palestine joined the organization with the
United
decision.
States of America decided to cut their financial subvention.
It was not a deliberate decision. It was because of the two laws that exist in the United States adopted in the 90s, which prevent the administration of continuing to contribute financially to the organization. But I want immediately to say that on a political side, we have all the support of the United Nations. We have a lot of joint initiatives. We launched 2 years ago an initiative teaching respect for all to eliminate discrimination in schools. I have opened recently a new UNESCO chair in George Washington University in Washington, which is important for the international development. And just recently also with Secretary John Kerry, we participated in a major conference in Metropolitan Museum, which was to alarm the international community about destruction of heritage and culture in Iraq. All this shows that we have the broad political support of the United States, but just we are prevented from being supported financially.
Okay, just listen to the slogan of UNESCO: to build peace in the minds of men and women. And one way in which you do that is through education. And get these statistics from the Out of School Children Initiative. 58 million children of primary school are out of school, and about 63 others of the secondary education are out of school. When you listen to such blistering statistics, can you confidently say that for the past 70 decades, UNESCO should be happy?
You know, this is an extremely, I would say, important question. We have to see this in dynamics. UNESCO has been the one agency that has been advocating so that education is recognized as one of the drivers of sustainable development. If you look at the history, just probably 25 years ago, it was not the case. Education was not considered important. Other things were more important than education. What UNESCO did was to adopt in Dakar in the year 2000 the Education for All program, which later on became Education for All. And since that time, the tendency I see is quite positive. There were more than 108 million out-of-school children at that time.
So the figures have
Nowadays,
dropped.
they're by half. It doesn't mean that we're happy with this. It doesn't mean that we're complacent. We have to make the case that every child goes to school. If we want to eliminate extreme poverty by the year 2030, which is the aim of the post-2015 Sustainable Agenda of the United Nations, one of the main, I would say, objective should be to put kids in schools. But here is what comes into the picture is conflict. Almost half of these children, 45% of these children are in conflict areas. We see also the disproportionate number of girls that are dropping out in secondary education. We need to focus where needs are. We need to focus on the most disadvantaged in the remote rural areas in some of those countries that still struggle with this problem. Our global monitoring report, every year we publish global monitoring reports on education on different aspects. This year the global monitoring report was about the impact of education on all the other development goals. We cannot achieve reducing child mortality and maternal health without education, because we know that educating women have their children healthier. If only they pass through primary education, children from such women can have 50% more the chance to survive. I believe that the fact that the Nobel Peace Prize award went to Malala Yousafzai,
the young Pakistani girl.
The young Pakistani girl who was attacked, brutally attacked.
By the Taliban.
By the Taliban. And in fact, we are very proud here at UNESCO that we were the first to recognize her courage already a week after this happened, and we had a major event here with the Prime Minister, with almost all the government of Pakistan, and we established a Malala Fund for girls' education. We work in the Swat Valley. Also the fact that Kailash, another very strong advocate, the Indian strong advocate also, Satyarthi, a good friend, he was here a week before he received the Nobel Peace Prize with me. We had here in this very moment taking photos and talking about how important it is that child slavery, the bonded work is being abolished. It is of primary importance if we want to achieve sustainable development.
Let's move to another area, Irina Bokova. Countries like Iraq, Syria, Palestine are of great importance to the agency you are heading, because they are areas full of history in terms of culture and civilization. Are conflicts there a resource of destruction of what UNESCO has been constructing over the years in terms of world cultural heritage?
We have seen an extremely, I would say, terrifying damage, physical damage of the world heritage in Syria. We have seen photos, we know what is happening there. Some of the heritage sites have been transformed into military camps, and this is not acceptable at all to us. What is worrying us also is the so-called hidden crisis, as we call it. This is the illicit trafficking of archaeological objects, of cultural objects, both from Syria and Iraq. We see that some of the extremist activities are financed by this illicit commerce, illicit trafficking of these objects. That is why we are alerting all the international community. That is why we did this important meeting in Washington with State Secretary Kerry. We did a similar event here. We work with the Interpol, we work with the customs in many countries around the world. We work with France, we work with the expert community, a big network, in order to stop, to put a halt on this illicit trafficking. I have appealed to the Security Council to adopt a ban on the trade with illicit objects, illicitly exported from Syria and Iraq.
Let's move to...
But if you allow me, because I think...
Madam Director
Yes,
General.
Charles, I think that something that I said during my very, I would say, emotional experience I had when I received a Doctor Honoris Causa in the University of Yaoundé. And I think this is something very high on the agenda also of the Camerooni people. You're a diverse country. Everybody tells me, before I went, everybody was telling me, if you want to see Africa in one place, you have to go to Cameroon.
Plus 250 tribes.
In terms of diversity, any types of
culture,
diversity.
Food, everything is there.
And Cameroon and your people live in peace and tolerance. It's a tradition of living. I know that there are those who want to push different groups and communities to fight each other. And I know this is happening, but you have this strong tradition. You have shown to the world that you can do it in a peaceful manner. And what I said is that what happens in Syria nowadays, what happens in Iraq with the cultural cleansing, what happens next door in the Central African Republic or in Nigeria, next door to Cameroon. This is not the way we see the world.
Okay, sure, Madam Director General. You were just talking a while ago about Cameroon. Part of your name is a geographical location in Cameroon, Bokova, the village of Cameroon's longest serving Prime Minister, Peter Mafanyi Musonge. Is that geographical affinity determining in any form the way you handle Cameroon's files at UNESCO?
Well, I know that Cameroon and UNESCO have a long history of cooperation, long, with very concrete, I would say, examples, and probably one of the most visible and important is the École Normale Supérieure that I visited when I was there. It's our pride of UNESCO, but you're right. In fact, it was already in 2010. I had here one of our staff from Cameroon was coming, and we were discussing different things, and he showed me a map where I saw the village of Bokova. I didn't know that it was so prominent, that there were prime ministers and others there. But I was very proud, and I'm even more proud after I visited Cameroon that my name is associated also with Cameroon.
The Director General of the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, Irina Bokova, thanks very much for accepting our invitation and for receiving us here in your office in Paris, France.
Thank you very much, Charles, and send my very best regards to all my friends in Cameroon.
You're welcome.
A magnificent country. I was very, very pleased to be there, very well accepted, and proud of this long history of UNESCO-Cameroon cooperation.
You're welcome, madam.
Thank you.